Hey guys, Jill here. Welcome back to Whispering Willow Farm. I am in the kitchen this morning. Just went and harvested some kohlrabi. We're going to ferment some things today. This has been highly requested content from you all about what we're doing in the kitchen, how we're fermenting things. So this is a really simple, easy recipe that I do with any root veggie. Kohlrabi is actually in the brassica family. It's considered a German turnip. You can eat it by yourself. The way we have done that is use it like a potato. But how we prefer it, and primarily the reason why we grow it, is to ferment it. Now I have been planning this video for what? Weeks now, waiting for my kohlrabi to get big enough to harvest and do a big batch at once. Last night we're laying in bed. I'm like, I'm gonna get up in the morning. If you'll help me harvest, we're gonna get on this. Yeah, sure, babe. So we go out there this morning. I really don't even know how I'm laughing right now. I'm like fighting the urge of tears. Go out there this morning. We are having issues with our chickens flying over into our garden. This has been an issue. We need to re-clip everybody's wings. They have been clipped before, not our new birds. And so I go out there. I am going to take a photo and pop it in this video. They've literally eaten all my cabbage down to the ground. Every single kohlrabi minus two, and it must have just been because they were full, and literally hollowed out the entire insides. The leaves, so usually we take the leaves and we save them for either juicing. They're good sauteed, much like a collard green. None of the leaves were salvageable. And the thing is too, and this is what I was telling Nathan, because I was quite upset by this. I'm like, I can go down, like a mile down the road, we have a farmer who sells eggs. You cannot find kohlrabi at the farmer's market, at a Whole Foods, at a grocery store. This is, unless I grow this is not something we have access to here. So my heart was broken this morning. I was so
Mama
upset.
wanted to shoot the chickens.
I was just like, get rid of every chicken we have. I don't even care. Obviously, Nathan was like, babe, it's farm life. Like, things happen. I know. But I do think I have enough here to get us 2 quarts worth and kind of show you guys the recipe. And here's a reminder, if you haven't clipped your chicken wings, go clip your chicken's wings. So the fermenting that we're using, we have this, it's called the Fermenting Starter Kit. One of our viewers sent us this. I'll put the link down for it down below. This is all I've ever used, and I really, really like it. Super user friendly. It comes with like all sorts of like recipe books, which was really nice. So you will need fermenting lids, but you can just use, we just use our wide mouth mason jars, which the lids for these are for wide mouth. And then if you don't choose to buy the starter kit, you will need a fermenting lid and weights to make sure that the actual vegetable is staying below the brine. I'm going to be using my own recipe, which is actually featured in the Farm Made Cookbook. So this is a cookbook that came out, do you remember when it came out?
A couple years ago.
A couple years ago, and they asked me. So it's traditional recipes from Americans farmers, and so they go by region. And they asked me to do a recipe, and so I've got my fermented radish recipe in here. I'll try to find this book and link it down below. I think it's in most
I think it's
stores.
in Tractor Supply.
It's in Tractor Supply. It's on Amazon. So that's really cool, and I actually had to break it out and reference it this morning because it's been since last year. I am doubling this though, so this recipe makes enough for 1 quart or 2 pints. Since I think I have enough for 2, I'm just going to go ahead and double this recipe. So what we're starting with is 6 cups of water, which we have behind us. Nathan's actually going to get on chopping these up for me. Unlike a radish, you can see I couldn't really make these in like little circular chips because that's just going to be way too big. So what you like to do...
I like spears, like kohlrabi spears.
Yeah.
So
Nathan's better with a knife than I am. So I'm going to get him on that, and then I'm going to walk through all the other steps for you guys.
Try it.
Wow, so we just tried it. It's actually really, really sweet. Surprisingly, much like a turnip, it can have that spicy taste, especially if it's gone too long. Some of these I was a bit worried because they will get woody. And some of these are kind of big, and so I was worried they weren't going to taste good. But one, you can eat them raw, very good just as a raw veggie, with like some hummus or something like that. we use them if we're cooking, like I mentioned, in a potato base. But yeah, those are fantastic. And you can see, you could even make these like we were talking about today. Nathan was gonna try to make me a hamburger out of like zucchinis or sweet potatoes. You can see how like thick they get too. This could be like the base of a hamburger if you didn't eat meat. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Nathan's chopping these up.
Try not to cut my finger off.
Don't cut your finger off. What we're actually gonna do, I'm gonna come on this side of you, babe. What we're actually gonna do is we're gonna fill our jars first. So I've got 6 cups of water over here. I don't have it on yet, and the tip is when you're doing this, you want it to be warm but not boiling. And if it does get boiling, you wanna make sure it sits at room temperature and it's completely cooled before you're ever putting it in the jar. So what I'm gonna do, I've got mixed pickling spice, I've got dill weed, and I've got our garlic from last year. The cool thing about fermenting, and then salt. Salt is required for all things fermenting, but other than that, you can really play around. You could put cloves in here. You could do a spicy one. You could do ginger, yeah, and turmeric. There's so many different things. This is kind of Nathan's tried and true. I will tell you what the recipe says, but I don't go off the recipe. I just put in there until it looks about right. So I've got 1 bunch of fresh dill or 2 tablespoons of dried dill, 1 clove of fresh garlic peeled and crushed, 2 cups of filtered water, and 1 tablespoon of salt. So you can see we've added in the pickling spice per Nathan's request. I'm gonna have him cut up some garlic. We're gonna just put all of that in the bottom of the jar. Then we'll start boiling our water. The only thing that's not gonna go in the jar but will go in here is gonna be the salt. So you guys can see here, they're kind of like these pickles. So just these perfect little bite-sized pickles. All right, so I just turned the water and salt on low heat. Now I'm going to start filling my jars. So as I had mentioned, I put down, which you actually, like if you want to get scientific with it, but for me, I'm just gonna sprinkle and look.
I like it.
Alright, so now that I've got it full, you guys can see kind of what it looks like here. I did do about 2 tablespoons of this and about a tablespoon of the pickling salt. And then garlic, we just kind of eyeballed how much of that to put in there. Alright, so now we get to start packing the jars. I will tell you, there is kind of a slight science to this. You want them packed in well, especially if you're working with, like you're limited on your jars. So what I like to do is tilt my jar and then just rotate it around. So I'm popping them in, rotating my jar. It's a lot like pickles. If you've ever canned pickles before and you're trying to squeeze as many cucumbers as you can in there, this is pretty similar. You can pack it pretty tight. Just find any loose spot and squeeze it in there. This ended up making quite a bit. Now, something to think about, I'm putting some of these like smaller pieces on the top here, but I am gonna have to leave room for the weight to stay on there, and I need everything to be underneath the brine. So really, I'm not packing anything higher than the rim here of my mason jar, because I know that that weight's gonna have to set on there. So you guys can see here, I've got it pretty good and stuffed. Now I'm gonna wait until the salt dissolves in the water, and then we'll just pour it over. I do recommend using a funnel. It makes it a lot easier and less messy. So I'm just gonna go through and do the rest of them. All right, so while the brine is cooling a bit, I wanted to show you what all I'm using, and this all came in that kit. So you have the weights, and this is what you will put, once you put the brine down, you put this on your vegetables to make sure that they stay under the brine. Here's the actual fermenting lid, whoops, and it's got all of the dates, so you go in and you move every single day. I let my ferments go about 2 weeks, but around day 12 I start testing them. And then it came with this vacuum extractor, and essentially what you do, and this is later on in the fermenting process, so for the first several days, even the first week, the lid is doing most of the work, but later on you can pop this on here, pull it up, and it extracts the oxygen from your jar, which to my understanding just helps prevent like mold and things like that from happening. One thing that I've noticed, and it even mentions this in the instructions, is that you don't need to do this more than like twice throughout your entire fermenting process, and it needs to be done later in the fermenting process. So yeah, I usually do this on like day 10, and then like right before I'm ready to like take the fermenting jars off and just put the regular canning lids on there to store it. That's another thing I will mention too, is once you've had the fermenting lids on and your days are up, you will test them. If they're, you know, where you like them, then you're great. You can take this jar off and just replace it with a normal lid, store it, keep it in your refrigerator, and it's good for, honestly, I've never had an issue with any of my ferments going bad, like mold or anything like that. Granted, we eat them pretty regularly, but just make sure that you're checking your ferments and things like that. So now we're gonna finish pouring this on now that it has a chance to cool to room temperature. Like I had mentioned, you're not wanting to cook any of these. You want them to be crisp, not soggy. And so for me, the key is kind of just making sure that your brine gets to room temperature. And then you want to leave about 1 to 2 inches, especially if you're doing a liquid brine. So I've got the glass plate here. It's going to go on here really well, which you guys can see here it has. Then I'm going to take my fermenting lid, secure it really well, set my day. And voila, just like that, we have got fermented kohlrabi. So 1 down, 3 more to go. Alrighty, just like that, the third one is done. Alright, so now these will go on the counter for, like I said, 7 to 14 days. That's going to totally depend on your guys' preference and what it is that you're choosing to ferment. For kohlrabi, I usually let it go for like 14 days. Is what I like, but it really is that simple. There is a little bit of prep work, obviously, you know, like chopping up is probably the most time-consuming part of this process, but if you're growing things like beets and radishes that are very, very simple, you can have a high turnaround. Like radishes, we're sowing, you know, every couple weeks, and we're getting them every couple weeks, and so it's really, really easy to just keep the fermenting process going. A few things we do like to ferment are beets, radishes, carrots, kohlrabi. Now, kohlrabi I can only grow a certain time of year, but the carrots, we've got a good bit of that. Now, with the carrots, we're making a gallon jar at a time, and so that looks a bit different, right? I don't have these fermenting lids. What we do is we've got these 2-gallon food grade tubs or plastic, you know, buckets, if you will, and that is what we ferment our sauerkraut in, our big batches of carrots. Now, I didn't have enough kohlrabi to do this, and with the radish, I find it's easier to do them in these small little batches because they can easily store in the fridge and don't take up a lot of space. But this is something you guys have asked to see, and it really is just that stinking simple. So I hope you guys enjoy. I'll put the links for everything down below, but I hope you all have a beautiful Memorial Day, and I'll talk to you soon.